Good morning. I'm Joe Ferrer Galicia. I'm with the Berkeley Resource Center for Online Education. And today's the first of a series of workshops that we plan on offering on campus. It's a historical event for us. We're really excited to be doing this. And today's kind of like a foundation. And we're going to show some of the offerings that we could provide. But more importantly, our goals are to allow folks to that are interested in accessibility to meet each other, because no matter what, in the field of accessibility, things are constantly changing, and no one could really consider themselves to be an expert at everything. Instead, a better approach is to learn from our community, find out who are experts, and who's willing to share that, and to create a safe space for doing that. So that's what our intention is, and our hope. And we're going to do some team building early on, right from the beginning. But initially as well, there are a number of campus resources and UC-wide resources that are available that folks aren't really aware of at this point. So what we want to do is have you all identify what your needs are and see what resources we come at you with already, and then we'll prioritize future workshops. So does that sound reasonable? And then, so for our agenda today, oh, and by the way, we are recording this so that it could be available for other folks, and it will be captioned, don't worry. But we're going to start off with introductions, and we'll have everyone share their accessibility interests. And I'm going to be abbreviating accessibility with A11Y. It comes from the coder world, where they try to abbreviate everything. So the 11 in the middle is how many characters are between the A and the Y in accessibility. And then we're going to match the interest in resources, prioritize future workshops, and based on that, on the interest, then I'm going to start doing some demonstrations based on the resources that we already have, so that when you leave here, you'll know where to go and you can start practicing right away. So we want to try to make this as utilitarian as possible. And then we'll have closing thoughts at the very end. So we're scheduled to go until 11:30. If you need to leave early, that works out. I'm also interested in starting a listserv based on accessibility, so that we could keep in touch as well, and I could share slide decks or answer questions if possible as well. So let's start with introductions and sharing accessibility interests. So I'm hoping everyone could gather in threes or fours. And in your groups, you'll introduce yourselves first to each other. And then just name 3 accessibility issues of interest or concern, just within your group. And then we're going to do a report back. So you all get to pick a volunteer or volunteer someone to report back. And during that time, then we'll introduce each other so that everyone could hear where we're all coming from. But it's kind of really important. Let's just start getting into these groups right away. Again, identify your interests and concerns. And so at this point, we want to hear a lot of folks talking. And I'm kind of walk around, and we'll gauge how much time we need. But we have plenty of time today, so let's just get comfortable and let's just start sharing what are our interests and concerns. Okay, so while we're doing this, I'm also going to let you know that this beautiful PowerPoint, it's actually an accessible template, and it's going to be made available to you as well. This is something that Berkeley did early on in our accessibility path, I guess. We had so many PowerPoints, and we were exporting those to Acrobat. When you start with the unaccessible PowerPoint, it's just a big mess. So we're really proud to be able to share this with y'all, and I'm going to go ahead and just start bulleting things on here, adding more slides. Little by little, I'll just kind of introduce you to this PowerPoint. And then at the very end, after the demo, I'm going to export this on a Mac and a PC so that you can see some of the problems that arise from those platforms. But I'm definitely going to show you where it's at, so you can download it and start using it right away.
What makes it accessible?
I'm going to actually show you exactly why and what But that's one of the workshops. We're going to have a workshop just on PowerPoints. Okay, let's start over here on the left. If there could be a spokesperson who could also introduce the rest of your group.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm Martha from African Studies. This is Kristen McManus from UCSF. This is Julie from, is it Berkrow? I want to get the way you say it short. Berko. And then Andy Peterson from Social Welfare and Goldman School. And I guess all of them are really much more involved in the guts of online education and creating courses and web stuff. And I run a center, and that's just one of the many different things that I do, among other things. So, and then in terms of issues, I think PDFs came up as something of, how to make PDFs work well, especially working with Java and indexing or searchability. There's, overall best practices and in general mobile devices. How do things transfer onto mobile devices? I'm also concerned, for me, accessibility is also back to the African continent when you have low bandwidth and sort of digital divide issues as well. Video captioning was another issue. So that's just some of the issues that came up here.
Wonderful. Okay. Did I get everything? The Java and PDF, I haven't heard of that one yet. So you are going to be our expert in the coming
Julie,
months.
Actually.
Oh, Julie?
Yeah.
Wow. Wow. Julie is one of our student remediation specialists. When she first started, one of the things I said to her is that you're going to be teaching me about accessibility really soon. And I think within the first hour, she's already jumping on it, and she continues to amaze all of us. Who wants to go next? How about the corner group over there? Over there, yeah. Young man in the blue shirt. Did you all pick a spokesperson?
I picked a spokesperson. I'm not really bad with names, so if I do it, it's not going to go well.
Even more reason.
I'll tell you what we talked about.
Yeah, let's do that.
Everybody will introduce themselves, and I can summarize what we discussed. Sure. Sounds fair. I'll start. Ryan John Domenico. I'm with Berko as well. I work mostly from an accessibility point of view, from the course development.
And sort of EGS, your kind of support issue. But I used to work closely with Lucy Greco and put in accessibility software in the computer labs. Experience with that.
I am Michelle McCashner for the Disabled Students Program, and
Karen McNamara, anthropology and social studies.
So we talked about two issues, I think, primarily, and one was live captioning, kind of in the context. We have a number of MOOCs coming up, kind of the end of the summer and into next year, that we'll be running various live sessions. So we want to make sure that we have live caption in place for those. Karen raised some issues around, or potential issues around accessibility in the classroom and things that she can and can't do, and concerns with how does she teach her students accessibly and assess accessibly. So that's a new point of view for us, for me, being all totally online.
So in terms of the classroom, you're talking about face-to-face and then the assessment piece as well?
Yeah, so both assessment, how do we do assessments, especially large lecture classes, in an accessible way? If we don't want to do Scantron. So what we do there, and another point would be for note-taking. A lot of my classes have been taught at a previous institution where I could say, we're going to go laptop-free. This class is a laptop-free zone. And that presents access challenges for people who need laptops. How do we split that? How do we make sure that people have access to the device that they need, but at the same time honor the goal of and the sort of principle behind what a laptop-free zone is?
Is that a trend right now that's happening, the laptop free?
Yeah. So there's numerous studies showing that not only does using a laptop decrease students' own ability to memorize, to sort of retain information, but it affects the students around them. And so if I was using a laptop to take notes, but also checking Wikipedia and checking Facebook, it would also affect my colleagues around me who would be like, oh my God, Brandon did what? And so it decreases attention. So there's studies showing that at the same time, some students still need laptops. But you can't say that if she's using this laptop, she's a DSP student because she's a DSP student. And so if that would flag her as a DSP student, so it's a huge problem.
Yeah, I've been in laptop zone free classes where my job is I have a laptop available to the student who I'm writing for. And it's never caused a problem because it is strictly anything that's showing up is just what's being said. And so I think, and sometimes professors will come over and they're like, oh, I don't mean you. And I never assume that that means me. And I think I've never had any students say, but their laptop's open. It seems like I'm not looking.
Yeah, but that's at the far end. But in the gray zone, there are students who have a DSP accommodation to use a laptop.
Yeah.
Their hands don't work as fast as they want. And so this deaf captioning is one end, but the great students bring it all.
And how do you not pinpoint students by allowing them to use it?
Thanks so much for sharing that. How about the corner table over here?
Okay, so Miles had to step out, but Miles is part of BTS. Tim is part of BTS. Judy's part of BTS. And I'm April, and I'm part of BTS. We co-mingle. So we had a couple different things that popped up out of our group. Media and video is one of our concerns, ensuring it's accessible, and also making the case for campus to understand why we might need to financially put in money towards accessibility. Documentation, so our help documentation, as well as our communication, so our websites, but also the emails we send out, making sure that the way that we support our services and document our services is accessible. Service ownership, we have service leads who help manage the services we provide to faculty. So making sure our products are accessible, and when we're using a third-party vendor, working with them to make sure that the product is as accessible as possible. And then also just the role that we play on campus as a hub for questions, making sure we're positioned to understand what is possible and giving instructors the best recommendations and resources possible.
Okay, so media and video, big category. We do have some resources on that, but that's definitely the future is trying to understand the requirements on that as well, and making it efficient and quick turnaround. Campus understanding of resource allocation for accessibility issues. So you're saying that you might have a tight budget when it comes to accessibility?
I think everyone has a tight budget. And so if you create a video and you're going to have 3 media caption it, where does that money come from? And so making a case to campus that we need to be thinking about accessibility as part of, baked in from the beginning.
Yeah. Actually, just
right now, even though we have a university-wide 3Play account for contract, every department still has to open up their own account.
Yeah, right.
Right.
And they have to pay for it.
Yeah.
Whereas other campuses, sometimes they cover all that money for you.
And that's the Streamline.
Version. Yeah.
You should have seen it when it first started.
the 3Play portal you're talking about, Tim?
Oh, yeah, when the contract first kicked in, like, it was just a nightmare. Like, they were asking for every single account to have purchasing involved, like central purchasing involved. Like, you couldn't open an account unless they had a letter from central purchasing.
And how is it now?
They don't need that. We worked it out.
All right. Communications, can you just elaborate a little bit more?
So it's documentation and communication. So we have our own help documents on the web, so people can DIY serve, making sure that that documentation is accessible. The websites themselves, we use Open Berkeley, but if you throw on a PDF, if you attach a PDF, if you have images on your websites, making sure that those are accessible. Sometimes we do step-by-step guides where we grab screen grabs out of the tool. You know, unless we put in captions around the screen grab, that's not necessarily going to be very accessible. So just kind of all of that piece of it, as well as we send out emails and we have social media interactions. So there's a lot of places where we're trying to communicate with our populations that may or may not be accessible.
Okay, and those populations might be internal to the university or external?
Almost exclusively internal, but sometimes it is external.
Okay. Service ownership and third-party vendors. Should I separate those two different ones?
So for us, I think they're two different things because there are things within our ability and then there are things where we try to influence. So the third-party vendor is obviously an influence issue. If there's nothing legally binding them to do something, it's just a matter of saying, hey, we'd like to keep this contract going. Would you make this work better? But there are things outside of our control, and that's third-party vendors.
Okay, and most of them now have some kind of statement about accessibility. Whether it's true or not is to be determined, but purchasing and the great work of the web access team, they've really pushed for accessibility to be in the language. So that's been a wonderful improvement in the last couple of years. We have one more group over here.
So I'm Kevin Chan from UTS, Tracy from Berkeley, Carmen from College Writing, and Kyoko from Library. And I think we basically touched on almost everything that we've already discussed. But one thing that did come up repeatedly that hasn't been highlighted is affordability. You know, obviously we're trying to do this. And while there's obviously a question of what campus is going to do, a lot of this stuff is going to be done at the departmental, faculty, or individual level. And how do we do it affordably at that level?
I should probably put that one at the very top.
Yeah.
Huh? So everything else resonated already. Right. Oh, that's great. Okay, I got everything on one slide. I'm going to go ahead and delete that one, and I'm going to go back.
So you've got one more group, us.
I'm so sorry, Scott. All right.
Mess up the slide.
This is
I know.
Lisa, right? Lisa, she works business analyst. Is that right?
I'm with the student.
She's a very smart person. She said the title, and I said, "Whoa, much smarter than I." So, and I am Scott Poe. I work with Joe, and I guess I'm the lead tech now, unofficially. But I am the online media specialist. I do live sessions.
Anything to add to our list?
No, we didn't even talk about it.
All right. Okay, so let's move forward. So so we're matching concerns with resources. So there's a number of resources that we have, and I went ahead and added everything to this accessibility hub. The story behind this accessibility hub is, 3 years ago when Berkeley first started really diving into accessibility, one of the things our team did was go out into the web and, all of the different sites and kind of get overwhelmed by a lot of different statements that are going on. I mean, I remember looking at a website on alternative text, and if I printed it out, it was 27 pages. Just on one little thing on alternative text. So what we decided to do is kind of curate resources that we found the most helpful, and we're making it available for everyone. It's not just for UC Berkeley. It's for everyone out there. So this is our hub, and we have it right now in Canvas. So it should look fairly familiar, and a lot of our work is based on Canvas. So that's kind of our primary concern. But it turns out that one of the biggest areas that we're involved with is formatting. And I mentioned the PowerPoint template right from the beginning. And in terms of affordability, what we were finding is that all these PowerPoints that we had archived in these old courses, whenever we tried to export them to, the PDF version, I mean, it was just, 20, 30 hours to remediate one lecture. That's like from the beginning when we were just learning. And then even just if we got better at it, at least 3 to 5 hours. With the template, it's so much easier. So one of the things we did was we started encouraging lecture templates within the Berkeley unit, but also a syllabus template, which involves Microsoft Word. So those two platforms are mostly what the campus uses. There's also InDesign that a lot of documents are being produced. We haven't had the best results with InDesign, but there are some best practices that I could show you on here. But are there any other platforms in terms of formatting that should be mentioned right now?
It's my understanding that Google Docs, their sheets may not be accessible.
Yeah.
So I don't know if there's a way that you can, if there is accessibility issues about that, to let people know that it may not be the best format.
Yeah. So
it's the most convenient to share.
It keeps changing.
There are two things involved here. One is what the website itself is accessible, and so the websites for Google Docs, Google Sheets are not that great with screen readers. And then the question is the output. So they can output to DocX, to PowerPoint, to PDF. And so to a degree, they probably tag the PDFs, but the formatting tags are not great. And so, but as long as you're not doing really fancy things, they're okay.
They're okay, okay.
But there are things like you can't do with the online versions that you could do with the full Word. So I think we have to make that distinction of what we're talking about.
That's great.
But as an online collaboration tool, we're all allowed us to use Google Docs now, and the online version is not accessible.
And that keeps changing. Google actually has a pretty good accessibility team, and they're always presenting at a lot of some of the major accessibility conferences. There's also third-party companies that are handling the exportation from Google Doc to Word or to PDF. But I'm always checking in with Lucy's team and asking her. She actually likes Google Slides a lot, whereas a year ago she was really frustrated because of the key commands were changing or different or just new. But she's reporting better results with that particular aspect of the Google Suite. There was one other one too.
About EPUB.
Yeah, that's what it was. The librarians, how many? We only have one librarian today. So to me, that's one of the more exciting aspects within the next couple of years, the EPUB format. There's a lot of work that's going around that, and it is being really positive results. But on the other side are the users. So when DSP does their intake, very few times will a student say that EPUB is one of their preferred formats. But that's going to change over time. But that is something that I'm really interested in, and I'm hoping that we could have a library group just focused on that. And I believe there's a group in Canada that have started an EPUB accessibility group that just focused on remediating super large documents that is also tied with affordability. So on here, we have best practices for Adobe Acrobat. At the same time, I've gone to Adobe workshops, I've spoken with them, and they are also frustrated by the results. And so it's not the best format. I think very few people who are screen readers will say, I want my material in Adobe Acrobat. They're going to prefer Word. But if you're pre-remediating, like anything public-facing, if the PDF is already remediated well, it exports pretty decently to Word. And then that process is sped up. This is something that Martha Velasquez works on campus, and she's actually one of my inspirations. When I first got on campus, I met with her, and she showed me the amount of remediation that she's doing. She showed me a chart, and just over the last 5 years, it's just incrementally getting more and more and more requests. And again, like, she's not keeping things in Acrobat. She's stripping it out, putting it in Word. From Word, then she can export to other formats quite readily. And it all depends on what the DSP letter of accommodation states for the student in terms of that final product or the final format. At the same time, I mentioned pre-remediation. So if you have public-facing websites, those PDFs need to be in really good shape. And what I want to show you on here is, I think it's under Getting Started. There's checklists. And what I found is these government workshops or websites, this is a PDF, Section 508 of the Americans for Disabilities Act. Government documents are all supposed to be already remediated. And again, it's the government, they have this mandate, but you're gonna find them all the time they're not. But their checklists are pretty good. And I won't go through all of them, but if you're looking for like, what do I exactly need to do, and we'll go through this with an in-depth PDF workshop, but these are some of the things that we integrate into our workflow. Ryan, you had a question?
Just to be clear, the resources on here are not requirements for the UC, right? So we're not governed by 508, we're governed by Title II, right? But if you meet the 508 requirements, you're ahead of the curve. So that's why, what we've done is, we try to always meet the best standard possible, and then we're kind of future-proof whenever we can. But at the same time, we don't want to tell you that you have to do that. We don't want to tell anyone that they have to meet standards that go above and beyond the laws that govern the UC.
Yeah, so that's a really important point because, like Ryan said, we're exempt from 508 within the UC system, but 508 recently aligned itself with WCAG 2 standards for the web and for PDF documents. And Title II is supposed to move toward that WCAG 2 standard as well. So that's one of the reasons we're striving for 508 right now. Community colleges and state colleges already under 508. And I think community colleges are way ahead of everyone else in the state of California in terms of meeting those requirements.
I think they have the most stringent, right?
Yes, I believe so. And they have a wonderful resource in Cupertino, the High Tech Training Center, where they offer free trainings as well. Okay, so I just wanted to start pointing out some of the resources on here that will help answer or inform your concerns and issues that you mentioned earlier. If you haven't heard of WebAIM, this is like an amazing website, but also they have a listserv where there's a lot of messages on there, but it's a wonderful example of a community of practice where there's plenty of experts on there that have years and years, decades of experience that will help answer some of those questions that people who are new to the field have. So their listserv is a wonderful place to get started if you're really interested in getting highly involved in this accessibility world. But they do have, they'll help interpret the WCAG 2 standards, and they provide some step-by-step examples as well. Does anyone want to say anything? Do you want to mention anything about WebAIM or any of these other resources?
Do I? Oh, I would say do yourselves a favor. It's tough, but if you can understand WCAG 2.0, it's sort of the baseline for everything. So I wouldn't spend like more than a half an hour researching and reading it. And a lot of times it's a big wall of words, but I'll give you the 30-second. It's 4 principles: POUR, receivable, operable, understandable, and robust. And under those, there's basically 12 guidelines in A. So the first letter, when you see the letter, there'll be like 3 letters. The first letter is the principle, the second letter is the rule, and the third letter is the criteria. So when you do testing and stuff and you see these 3 things, so the criteria is broken down into a pass fail. So when you see WCAG, just take a little time to try to understand WCAG because it keeps coming up. And so it can just take 30 minutes researching it, then a lot of this other stuff will make a lot more sense. And you don't get to a real decision until you go to the criteria. So you really frustrate yourself if you're just sticking at the rule and don't understand the criteria. So that's what I can say about that.
Thank you so much. Let me go back real quick to some of these issues. Okay, so PDFs, Java and PDF, we're going to have to get back to you on that one. Mobile devices and accessibility. Again, that's a difficult one because there's so many different platforms, and if you really want to be compliant with all of them, you need like a little lab where you have all your different devices and you're running them, and you're always having to deal with the updates for those for that software. But if you're following a well-structured web format in terms of your heading levels, and I could demonstrate that, it's going to look a lot better on a mobile device. So in terms of like HTML structure, semantic structure, it does transfer over with mobile very well. Low bandwidth. We work with edX, and edX has a video player that allows for downloadable videos. And the folks, the instructors that work in developing countries find that that's very helpful, that's like a very common thing where you just download the videos all at once when you're at an internet cafe or whenever you have high bandwidth, and then you could complete the course offline, or at least the task, and then get back on it. But again, those videos themselves have to be captioned. The edX video player allows for downloadable caption files, but also transcripts. So that I think low bandwidth and a good video player are very key as well. Are there other issues that with low bandwidth and accessibility that should be mentioned? Okay, I just wanted to make sure that. Okay, captioning and live captioning are really, I mean, it's kind of like the low-hanging fruit for us right now because we do have that 3-play contract, and it's a really nice workflow that 3Play has for submitting, altering, downloading, and importing them or getting them into your videos. I am going to show you the portal where it's located in just a second. Let me just get a little. I want to go back to that portal, so I just wanted to see if I could get a couple more issues here. Media. Okay. Okay, let me go back to this Berkeley Hub. And under UC resources, Educational Technology Services has this accessible course content page. And it's very comprehensive. It's available for you, so I'm not going to go word by word on here. But on captioning and transcriptions, this is where you could find the portal for 3Play. So there's, all right, the process purchase order, this is it, Tim, right? Purchase order processing?
Yeah. So, I mean, just to speak in that really quickly, the 3Play stuff is great if you're working on like a project, something where you're generating like a fair amount of content over a period of time. It's pretty much worthless for people making a one-off video.
Yeah, and I'll go back to that YouTube
So,
caption.
yeah, that's where the YouTube thing comes in. We're also thinking about working out a way where our service can deal with the purchasing end of the free play thing for, you know, for people that don't want to deal with the YouTube thing and they've just got like 1 15-minute video or something.
That'll be really helpful. Let me go back real quick because there was the how to caption YouTube videos. And with machine learning, the whole captioning is going to get better and better. So it looks really promising. But one of the things that YouTube isn't doing right now is speaker identification. When you have more than one person, a deaf student won't know who's actually speaking. So that's one of the things that you got to be able to go back and do and edit your caption file that's initially generated through YouTube. So that's really important to note. And that's something that a lot of folks forget about when they're doing the auto captioning on YouTube. The auto captioning is a really good first step, but it shouldn't be the last step. But okay, so anyways, the actual settings, everything's on here for the caption. So that's really wonderful. And then there's the Amara. Amara is integrated into Canvas, correct? So if you want to do the embedded videos in Canvas or in vCourses, Amara, it's fairly easy, but again, it's going to be labor intensive. And then there's a couple of other ones on here as well.
The Rev one looks really interesting. I was just talking to someone from UCI, Irvine, that they use Rev. So it's that you use it as well?
UCSF uses it. A lot of our big departments use it, pharmacy, university relations, and they get a much better price.
Yeah, the bulk of the captioning that EPS does is actually through Rev.
And do they do speaker ID?
They'll do pretty much anything you want.
Because so the person I was talking to said that their machine captioning is really their accuracy is really high. It's like 85-90% or something like that, which is really good.
I think we pay for a higher level.
Yeah, but is that human then, or is that?
It's human review.
Yeah. So my point is that for this, you can get this cheap or a cheaper rate with them and still get, a good product. I mean, 90% to 95%, depending on the content. The STEM, like the science courses, the things that have.
It's hugely dependent on the quality of the recording.
Yes.
Huge.
Okay.
So I would put more money behind a good microphone.
So it's
I'm not kidding.
Rev is very good about kicking stuff back if they can't do it. Like if it's science stuff or if it's somebody with a heavy accent, they'll kick it back to us and then we'll send it to free play. And free play can usually handle it. So.
The free play is so much more expensive, right?
Right, yeah. So, and because we're working on a recharge thing, we actually, and now when Berkeley Video and Berkeley AP go out and do events, it's an automatic thing. They don't have an option to not pay for captioning.
Yeah.
So like if your event's 2 hours, you're paying for 2 hours of captioning up front. So,
Does anyone know anything about pop-up archive? I know that Research IT, ETS History Department uses that exclusively, and they say it's free, but
Yeah, I'm not sure about that one. One thing that we should also be aware of is described video or video description. And what I really want to mention now is this is on our getting started at the very bottom. There's a group out of Canada, AMI, that they've been doing audio description for quite a while, and they've agreed to let us post some of their best practices. So this integrated described video white paper is worth reading, and basically it's the best practice for recording the video so that you don't need to do video description, that whoever's presenting is describing what's happening well from the beginning. And that'll save a lot of money and just make for a better workflow. So that's also better. It's worth checking out. I believe I put something up about YouTube as well. Let me just check real quick. All right. I must have taken it down because YouTube's, they keep changing their player. But it has been tested by the web access team, and that video player itself is really good. Vimeo hasn't been doing as well. There are other accessible video players that kind of like have the full, just like I was mentioning in terms of edX, like the downloadable caption file, the downloadable transcript, a navigable transcript that's plain so that you see it and you can just click on it and go to that area. And that's good not just for deaf or hard of hearing, but for folks with cognitive disabilities or just folks that need, something different, that you don't have time to watch the whole video, you can just go through it. So that's another benefit for everyone. Yes.
I believe 3Play has a video player as well that's accessible.
Yeah, so they demonstrated an interesting plugin to us that it's in beta right now, so we can't really recommend it. But they're making it so that it integrates with audio description, and it's a computer generated audio description. So you don't have to pay for someone to go do the audio description separately, and it's editable.
You still have to pay for it.
You still have to pay for it, but you don't have to pay for human talent to go into a recording studio and have the technicians and all that. So that there's a price.
That sounded like that was still very firmly in beta.
It's in beta, but with machine learning, it's going to get better. That's my hope. I think I'm a little bit too hopeful at times. But,
yeah, it is really neat. And I think it'll be. They will deploy it at some point in time. But when we talked to them, it was still like they were working it out. And I think. A lot of the people in the media platforms, so Kaltura, they're really different camps in terms of like when people are doing this for entertainment or media like that, it's a much different approach and different workflows. And when they come to us and they start to talk to people in education, our needs are totally different than what you get, for entertainment. So I think that's the biggest adjustment that a lot of them are making.
Just say more about why it's completely.
Well, so it's the context is different. What a student needs to understand the content on the screen or the content that's being delivered is different than what anyone needs to grasp to understand what's going on in an entertainment piece. And for us. When we're developing our courses, a lot of what we have on especially the STEM courses are the most complicated, right? You have equations on screen, you have chemical compounds, any number of things that are not necessarily addressed in the narration or in the narrative. And even though we try to work with our instructors around the scripting so that they do call out these things, they do address them, and it gets then added to the captions. For some of these courses, it's all annotation, right? So how do you live caption that, or how does it even work from a logistical point of view? Because when you have live caption or video description, you have these different tracks, right? You have your audio track, and then you have this description track. And if you're just recording someone and they don't take pauses, you then have to go back and insert the pauses to allow the description pieces to run, because the user has to hear both. So it's just a lot. I mean, it's a very complicated workflow from what we've seen so far. And I think everyone's figuring it out as they go.
All right, so let me come back to this important website. April, can you just make a statement like because right now ETS is kind of central on campus, and if someone has an accessibility question, who do you think, or who's the best person to contact?
So there's, you can start with the Access Content website, and you may find what you need under the resources. There's a pretty in-depth section, similar to your full list on the Beam Courses site that you created. The other thing that you can do is start here in the AIS. So ETS is housed here. Most of our services have representation here through our consultants, but we also represent the library and digital humanities and probably about 15 to 17 services depending on the day and what's going on campus. And if we as ETS don't know how to get you started, we probably know who can get you started. So either the website or drop in here or send an email to ais@berkeley.edu and we'll help get you on the right path. We don't guarantee to know the answers. We're learning along with everyone else, but we've kind of taken on this goal of trying to be a hub and get people the resources they need.
Thank you so much. Let me go back to UC Resources, and it was mentioned about third-party platform accessibility. I highly recommend attending August 10th. I'm going to show some of the tools that I use for automated testing of websites. And I think that should be kind of like the first step for a third-party platform assessment, but also for your own website or your own content. So you could learn about how to start remediating that. But once you do that, the next step would be to go to the web access team. And they've been doing accessibility longer than anyone on campus. They're amazing at it. There's Caroline, Lucy, Anna, and Kathleen Liu is their supervisor. So what you could do is you can request an accessibility clinic. They do them once a month, and Lucy will go through it on her screen with her screen reader, and just start trying to interact with it. And they document the problems. They generate a clinic report, and then that could get sent to the third-party vendor. Or if it's your own site, then you can start working on remediating it. They also have a number of wonderful resources on here, so it's really worth making time to check that out. And we definitely want to include some screen reader demonstrations on some of these future workshops.
I'll also plug as a communicator that the Open Berkeley platform is baked and accessible. So that's been really nice. The Access Content website's on it, the ETS website's on it, the AIS website's on it, and the new templates that Public Affairs is now offering. There's a Dreamweaver template, I think it's a Dreamweaver template, and there's a WordPress template. Those are also mostly accessible. It still depends on what content you add into it, but there are some resources already starting to help you create better sites.
So exciting. Okay, so let me go back to our PowerPoint. Let me get this out of the way.
So how long ago?
11:30? Yes. All right. So I want to just show the workshops that I'm going to change that we already have available. Like we're ready to start doing these. Is your web content accessible? So this is available for signing up August 10th. I'll show you how to use Code Sniffer and the accessibility, the Ally tool. Well, actually, it's called Totally. Using keyboard commands and just learning some of the basics for, really checking for semantic structure as well. Workshop 3 is accessible Microsoft Word documents. I thought like bring your own document would be a nice kind of change things up, so that I want to try to make it as relevant as possible. And if you bring a 2-page Word file, I could show you how to remediate it, and then we can practice exporting it as well. So these are the different things that I want to cover in that. I'm thinking these are more like a 2.5-hour workshop. 1.5 won't be enough. There won't be enough for hands-on, especially if everyone has a different document. But I just want to kind of gauge, after I go through these, I want to gauge your interest in these. Accessible Adobe Acrobat. Exporting a remediated Word file to Adobe Acrobat. I'm going to start with a Word file. There's another workshop in the future that's just like remediating an existing Adobe file. I don't want to do that right now because we're having such different results, and a lot of it has to do with publishers putting on digital DRM,
Rights management.
digital rights management, and it totally messes it up for us. It's really hard to get away from that. I don't want to spend a lot of time on that, but once we crack a better workflow, we'll offer that. So starting from a Word file and then fixing things in Acrobat, and then running through an accessibility checker. There's also some accessibility, Adobe Acrobat online sites that we can also use for remediation. PowerPoint, I think this is always a really fun workshop to do because everyone has experience with PowerPoint, but then once you start doing them accessibly, you realize that your workflow has probably been completely wrong. I'll show you how to use master slides, how to alter master slides, make sure the color contrast is good. And then we're always going to do alternative text and metadata, and then the last step is always exporting to Acrobat and then rechecking in there. It's good to do multiple platforms from Word and PowerPoint to Acrobat, so you can see, just start getting used to the remediation process. This is something that we recently started becoming very comfortable with, thanks to Julie's help. But Acrobat Forms, and it's not that difficult if we have a good layout. It just takes time, but we want to offer that as well. But it's kind of exciting to have an accessible Acrobat form, because you don't have to download a PDF and then write it in and then rescan it and then send it over. It just seems like it's kind of a waste of time. But Acrobat Forms is an exciting new venture for us that we'd like to offer. And then there's this introduction to online course accessibility, and I'm going to click on it. Let me see. Actually, I'm going to go through the Berkeley Hub, but we're going to be doing a half-day workshop at it's a national conference in Colorado in November. This actually presentation got accepted, but we have the course that anyone could just go on and start taking it now. But we also thought it might be good for us to do it, in a lab setting or a room like this, so that we can answer more questions as they come up. So let me go back and show you where that course is at. If I go to Getting Started, online courses, and an introduction to course accessibility. So this is on B courses. You don't need a login or a password. We worked with a recent PhD student from UC Berkeley to build this course. Let me click on here. So there she is. Yu Ting Su, we just call her Ting. So she helped design and develop this class. And the idea behind this was, for every module, we have a guest interview with either a student or an alum or someone in the field who's talking about accessibility. So I don't think my audio is going to come out. Oh, yeah, got to keep that on mute. So it starts off with the video, and then we have content, we have resources. At the end, when we go to module 4, 5, and 6, let me just see. Yeah, so we start doing more testing. So 4 is on web testing your websites. But on 5 and 6, the PowerPoint workshop is already on here. So when you leave today, you could rush back to your office and start taking this PowerPoint workshop. You could download the PowerPoint template and start adding content, and it's step by step for you. It's really nice. there's the PowerPoint and the Word version as well. There's also a course in the Berkeley Hub. Let me go back to it really quick.
I'm sorry, we find this course that you just mentioned in e-courses?
Yeah, so the link is if you go to the Berkeley Hub, and if you just Google Berkeley Hub, it's going to come up. If you look up here, Getting Started, online courses. So there's these two courses, Introduction to Course Accessibility and then Accessibility Basics. So the Accessibility Basics is when we remediate an edX MOOC, we follow we have basically a checklist for everything that needs to be, that it has to pass in order for us to get approved. We just put it in a course, so it's now available for everyone. So it's it applies to edX, but it also will apply to your website or your B-Course site as well. So those are things that you could get started with right away. All right, and then
the online, the ETS site, the accessible course content, access, that you can find the hub on there as well. So they're all linked. Yeah. Find one, find out.
Okay, so let me go back and we already have the second workshop scheduled for August 10th. So is your web content accessible? Is there anyone here that would be interested in that? Can I just see a show of hands? Okay, so there's a few folks already. We'll send out a link for registration for that. I'm going to go to this next one, and this is called Accessible Microsoft Word Documents. Just with a show of hand, who would be interested in this one as well? A little bit higher, if you don't mind. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Okay, so let me just. All right, so the next one is. Accessible Adobe Acrobat. How many folks are interested in that? And then you're gonna have to be a little higher. So let's see. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then the next one is Microsoft PowerPoint. Anyone interested in that one? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. All right. Adobe Acrobat Forms. Couple people.
Get CSS to do that. The forms are terrible.
6. Okay, so there look like there's 3 folks. All right, and then the Introduction to Course Accessibility. Would anyone be interested in doing it as a group together? Let's just see a show of hands. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. All right. Okay, and then what on this list isn't? What isn't on the list that we need to address?
So this might be a bigger campus issue, but I know one of the things that as communicators we're always asked to create is infographics. And most of us shy away from them because we know they're not accessible and because we don't necessarily have designers. But visuals or more complicated visuals, things that are graphics, things that are infographics, whether they belong on the web or in social media, those are things that are emerging for the communicators on campus.
Yeah, I think that's something Jean had mentioned earlier, and that might be something that we could bring in some guest speakers to help lead. But that would probably be an InDesign thing, correct?
Probably, but sometimes they're done in Photoshop, sometimes they're done in Illustrator.
Yeah.
So I think even approaching, and we can have a discussion offline about approaching the communicators and talking to the communicators about a path that's specifically the type of work that they do.
Okay.
I might add, I don't know if it's connected or, but the issue we raised before about, there's all this documentation, this whole knowledge management ecosystem on campus, probably tons of images that are not accessible. Not the steps to do it, but how does one think about describing images?
Yeah.
Screenshots and things like that. So,
Yeah, that's like the example I gave earlier is like when I looked up alternative text at the beginning, oh my God, it just kept going on and on and on.
Yeah.
I mean, the best advice is like you just got to start trying and
Right, but maybe there are some best
there,
practices.
yeah, well, the best
People who have
practice,
practiced enough to like,
Yeah.
what the shortcuts are, you know.
the best practice is to have it described in the paragraph before or after.
Right, but what are the words you use to describe it well, like?
Yeah. Yeah, there is a group in Silicon Valley that specializes in that, so maybe we could invite them in as well. Okay, any other workshops?
I just was more curious for edification as far as standards. There was mention of things like there's WCAG, there's 508, there's Title II. What is everyone's standards, lowest, highest? I guess I'm wondering for all uses. There was mention of like 80% accuracy in some things and
Yeah,
in-
captioning.
I'm just curious as far as what the lowest standards are, and is there somewhere on a website that has that and that explains where as a campus and is each department and whatnot responsible for, and best practices was mentioned, so what is the best practices and what are our standards? I don't know if that's too complicated.
Technically, I think it should be WCAG.
Is that what that's what I was wondering then.
WCAG calls for audio description of video, which I don't think anybody is really prepared to do under that.
And that was my question, like, is it a hard and fast rule that we have to follow WCAG? That was just my question.
With no guidance from UCOP, I don't know.
I can
How-
answer it.
Yeah.
Oh,
Okay. Guidance from UCOP, which they don't like to be called UCOP. You see Office of the President, there is a exact policy with a capital P, and it is that we follow WCAG 2.AA. That being said, it's very vague. There is no like exact list, and that's a huge issue for everybody, because you tell people do something and you don't tell them to what standard. And WCAG is vague. That's why I said do yourselves a favor, spend 30 minutes trying to understand it, and you will see a lot of loopholes and vague. And just know you can follow every single rule and pass every single test, and you can still have an inaccessible outcome.
so the policy, we actually link it on the access content website, so it's the, why do I need to make my content accessible paragraph, the second paragraph. So the policy is actually linked there, and we quote basically saying that WCAG 2.0 is the current IT policy standard. But yeah, there's, that's our stretch goal, I think, is what campus would say.
Yeah, here's the UCLP website. It's linked from the ETS site, and I mean we do try to shoot for WCAG 2 and everything we're doing, even though Title II doesn't specifically mentioning it right now, but it will. Everything's kind of moving toward that. Any other workshops? Okay, this is plenty. It looks like 4 and 5 got 8 votes, so we'll probably prioritize those. But our idea, our goal is to offer these often throughout the year, so that we could just keep, allowing people to build their skills, spread the knowledge, and try to change the culture on campus so that accessibility is prioritized, and to make things a lot more affordable by starting off with accessibility in mind. Let me get back.
Offer an observation. It's unclear to me both for this workshop and the continuing ones who the target audience is. It seems like you're focused very much on the work products, with your PDFs, PowerPoints, etc., and not about how a faculty member would make a course be accessible. And so I'm wondering, there's only a handful of faculty here, and I personally wanted to see more faculty buy-in and have more faculty here, but at least from how I see both this one right now and the future ones, I don't see a lot of faculty being enticed to go. And that's totally fine if this is mostly oriented towards ETS and other IT staff, that's great. But I'm wondering if it would be better for the faculty to suggest separate faculty workshops, if that's the goal.
Yeah,
Yeah,
so
we would be happy to work with you or whoever to develop a curriculum or to identify and address those needs. We're just, our perspective is more the administrative and the back end, but we would love to work with faculty and
Okay.
get as much buy-in as possible, and then whatever needs or gaps that we identify, we'd love to do that.
I think it was advertised in Kelly's student faculty that there was going to be a dimension to this.
Yeah.
There wasn't a strong faculty.
Right, I think it kind of comes up further. So this course is targeted towards faculty to help the accessibility course, so that will help you develop AP courses and things like that.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is that another component is that when you do talk about courses, you talk about online courses.
Yes.
And so that's also very different kind of, I think, when you talk about academics and faculty interests. So I would like to have more faculty buy-in, but I think it would have to be a different series perhaps.
Yeah, and maybe we can talk to CTL as well, pull them in on that. Yeah, because I think when it comes to our expertise is online. When it comes to the classroom, there are other people with different skills, knowledge, so yeah, we'd love to do that.
And I think part of the issue is not just for in the classroom, but faculty who are putting stuff on the web. But the series of workshops described here, I think, is more of a time commitment than most faculty would make. And so, yeah, I think it does need to be. We need to create something that faculty will be interested in and attracted to. And so, it'd be actually great to continue more about how to structure that.
I really appreciate the idea of audience, who are we targeting and how to focus on those particular interests and concerns. This introduction course accessibility, the target is faculty, and we made it so that it's just open so that folks can get to it, because we know the time commitments, especially here at UC Berkeley, faculty have very limited time. So having things online available for them is really key. But building a community of practice within the faculty is something that we would love to support. And we'd love to work with you on that. And I think that in our goals and our dreams is for that to happen as soon as possible. We're not faculty though, so it needs to come, I think, from the ground up there. But we'll do our best to provide resources when available and when needed.
So one of the things that Haas does with a lot of things, they have faculty sponsors, for different programs or ideas. And I think that they've had a lot of success with that, right? So if change comes from within, it's often more successful. If we're standing outside, we're not faculty, and we're saying, hey, you need to do this, this, and this, it's not going to have the same effect as if we can work with the group on the inside and kind of generate that. So yes, we would be very excited to work on those things.
Okay, so this is my last little piece. This is the PowerPoint, and I mentioned we made it accessible. There's going to be a workshop just on using this, but I'm on a Mac, and I'm going to go ahead and export it as a PDF file. So I'm going to File, Export. I'm going to call this Slide Deck 2, and it's exporting. All right, so now I got to go and open it. And what I'm going to do, okay, that's going to work still. Here it is, and in Acrobat, there's an accessibility tab. This is the latest version of Acrobat DC. We all get that free at UC Berkeley. If you go to the tools section, there's all kinds of like add-ins. So this is where accessibility is at. So if you go there and then you go to reading order, and then I'm just going to say show the order panel, and then over here, there's the tags, and it's saying there's no tags available, even though it's an accessible version. So now what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna switch over, and this is Amazon Workspace, and we're so privileged to have the opportunity to demonstrate this because it's just been made available. It's not available for everyone right now, but if there's interest in it, we might be able to get some spots for this. It's not a supported platform at this time, but it's working. It's been working really well. So I went ahead and I exported this one, and this one shows, it comes up with the tags. So this content could be read by a screen reader because these tags exist. They both look exactly the same, but one is just, it's going to behave very differently than the other. So visually, for us with sight, we're seeing the same thing, but for someone who's using assistive technology, it's not going to be robust in any way for them. And I'm not just talking about screen reader users, but there's other formats or platforms that for assistive technology that these tagging systems will help learners access content. And in the end, that's what we want. It is a social justice issue for us. People who have been historically excluded from these content, we're making them available. We're helping them make it available, and we're listening. And we're just taking it one step at a time to make progress. And you all being here is very much part of that. So I'm really excited about the future for accessibility at UC Berkeley. And with everyone's contributions and help and support and goodwill and positive energy, we're going to make a big difference in the coming year.
So, sorry, clarification. So you exported from something that was created using the accessible template, but it still needs more remediation once it's exported. Is that right?
Yeah, so earlier I mentioned that if you're using a Mac platform, you can't really export accessibly in Microsoft Word or PowerPoint.
Okay.
So we needed, like for Berkeley, when we were doing this, because we're all on Macs there, we love Macs, we actually had to buy 3 PCs just to do that final step of exporting. So we use like Microsoft Remote Desktop to get access. This Amazon Workspace, it's just another way of having access to a Windows machine. But it's the same document that we're exporting. I just exported it from a Mac versus a PC. And I just wanted to show that there is a big difference, and that our workshops are going to be based on proper remediation. So we need to be either in a Windows lab or have access to something like this Amazon Workspace. Tim,
how realistic is that for faculty on campus, for example, to have that access?
I'm not going to answer that. But
this is one of the things that we need to figure out,
Yeah.
right, from a campus point of view. But I think that right now that there's a lot of momentum with the recent DOJ case and everything that's going on around that accessibility will have a little bit more drive. So we'll see. But it's still, we're not centralized, right? We have so who's driving and who has the resources?
But why not just install Fusion and in a copy of Office on it and just do it on your Mac?
Yeah, that works. I have that on this computer. That's another option, and it's free.
We have all the licenses.
Yeah.
Isn't that part of self-service too?
No, I think you need CSS to do it for you.
They have to do an image.
So if CSS created an image, it would be so accessible for everyone.
Well, yeah, if they just made it part of their base Mac image, that would be awesome.
Yeah, it still might require training. But I think the bigger question too, in terms of accessibility on campus, if professors are creating content accessibly on their Mac, as long as they're archiving their files so that Martha's team could get access to those original documents, it's going to slow down that time between the creation of a letter of accommodation and providing those accessible documents. So it's kind of like, again, accessibility in mind. Professors don't necessarily need to make it to go through this process, but if they have an archival system and it's kind of institutionalizing within their unit or department, then that speeds up the process and it makes it more affordable for everyone as well.
So then that feels like more of a reasonable target for training faculty.
I think, yeah, for first steps, that would be great.
But then again, we also need some reason for them to want to do that needs to be made more clear as well.
Yes, and I think those reasons will be articulated in the near future. Yes.
Can you go back to your PowerPoint presentation and just show them that there is an accessibility checker in PowerPoint, just to remind them that inside a lot of things Word is, just try to get in the habit. A lot of times it's 2 layers under, but get in the habit of all your tools, try to find the accessibility tool, because when you're talking about like baking it in, that and what I like about the accessibility checkers inside your native tool is it helps you learn the concepts of, you know, DOM order and things like that with Kanban. So can you go to
yeah, so it's under review.
Yeah.
And then check accessibility. Microsoft Word recently got this updated, so that's also a possibility.
And it may not come up with anything, but I'd just like to say, you know, it's a really nice way to try to find those. And a lot of times they're buried a couple layers deep, but they really help if you can, you know, in whatever, and then push for the software, the latest versions that have those accessibility checkers and start just baking it in. Because remediation sucks. I'm sorry.
I love that, and I feel like one of the things we can do somehow is like, you know, the top 5 things you as an instructor can do that will take less than 10 minutes to ensure accessibility. You know, something that's, again, isn't going to take a ton of time.
Any other closing comments?
I do want to say, when we have our fall launch in 21st or so, and I plan to tell our department, you know, because in college writing program, you can do even simple things like avoid red and green. I mean, that's very basic, but I mean, my son is colorblind too, so I mean, there are different things that, like the accessibility buttons on Microsoft Word, or so I appreciate this. This is really helpful. I think many people just aren't aware, you know, and that's why I'm here to become more aware. So thank you.
Thank you. And we do have like, so we did on the getting started, we created our own best practices. So there's this Canvas guide for it's a quick start guide, and basically our quality assurance for all our courses is part of this. So it's definitely worth checking out. Here you go. So there's a definition for accessibility. Let me just lower it a little bit. So yeah, using headings, you know, it's kind of described, you know, briefly on here. And our workshops, our face-to-face workshops are going to focus on these things exactly. And again, like the idea is that we get used to sharing, finding out, you know, what is most reasonable for our unit. Have an immediate plan, but what's our 2-year plan? What's our 3-year plan? And little by little, again, like the culture on campus will start changing. Expertise will be more diffused. And in terms of portability, again, it's going to be less expensive to remediate because that process is going to be a lot quicker, a lot slimmer. So it's 11:29, and I just want to thank everyone for coming. And we'll be sending out some emails. Hopefully get a listserv set up. But again, thank you again. And we just want to keep sharing, and please send your feedback. You can send feedback directly to us. And we'll hope we'll be seeing you August 10th.
Thank you.